Welcome back to Replay. Today we're talking about In the Name of the King, a Umable amazing epic that involved a star-studded cast as they explored the Kingdom of Ebb, based on the video game Dungeon Siege. I'm joined today by Yahel from Wrestle with Gaming.
I have been waiting to talk about this for the first time in a long time.
Super stoked to talk about this again after we fumbled the first recording. But yeah,
I fumbled the first recording. Well, is it fumbling the recording if you don't do it?
Yeah, I mean, we really wanted to talk about this movie for collective 3 hours.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about it again.
We needed to get this down again. But yeah, in the Name of the King, a Dungeon Siege tale, which is like kind of thrown there on the end, is based on the game Dungeon Siege, released in 2002, made by Gas Powered Games, and published by Microsoft for basically Windows, PC, and also came out on Mac. So a lot of people got to enjoy that. I know the last time we had our conversation, I know you hadn't ever played it, but Dungeon Siege was a pretty fun dungeon crawler type game, had some pretty creative takes on the genre by the sense that it was a classless game in the sense that you pick up a weapon and level that up for your character, had a seamless overworld where there was no load points and like that. You would just travel from one area to another, and it was kind of a seamless one kind of continuous map. Had that kind of great thing, and that actually continued on to the multiplayer when you played it online with people. So it was a pretty great innovative game for that. And it sold 1.7 million copies, so it was a pretty successful franchise for a PC game at the time. And then Umable somehow got the film rights, pennies on the dollar. Not sure how that worked out, but he did.
Is it Umable or Uwe? I generally don't know how to pronounce his name.
I don't know.
And I think last time we recorded it, I pronounced it like 3 different ways.
Yeah, I've never.
Uwe I've heard before.
Yeah. Bowl. I could always say like bowl or Umable. Is the way I've always ever said it. But it seems to me like most online reviewers just go Umable.
I just say father.
Father. the father of the video
Father
game generation
cinema.
Of films. One day there's going to be film classes taught, like the guy who made the film A Birth of the Nation. Umable's films will be studied in college by academics to the greatness they truly are, and how Burt Reynolds played a medieval king, and that was the truest of cast usurping your expectations.
Yeah. Yeah, this is quite the cast too. I should pull up their IMDb. I don't know what I was thinking. Like I was gonna just remember off the top of my head.
Tell you. But yeah, I can dive in this while you bring that. So essentially, the film's pretty interesting because it's a really bad video game movie made by Umable, who had already released a couple of other really bad flops at this point. I believe Blood Rain, before that Alone in the Dark. But somehow, for those couple of films, there was a weird period in time where he would get big star actors to be in his films. Right. And in this one, he got an absolute star-studded cast with Jason Statham, Ray Liotta, Burt Reynolds, Ron Perlman,
Claire
Matthew
Forlani, who was big at the time. I don't think she's really big now, but
not too popular now. But I mean, in the early 2000s, she was huge. And then like Matthew Lillard, who was
another one.
He's just kind of been around, but mostly known for his work as Scooby-Doo now. But he was in the film Wing Commander that we talked about previously on Replay.
Mike Dopad's been in a bunch of stuff too.
And then the actor who played the dwarf from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, John Rhys Davies.
Yeah, he's a big one in this one.
Yeah, he's the dwarf from Lord of the Rings. He's I can't remember the character's name, but he was on Sliders. I mean, he's been in a million things. Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom. 2 episodes of Voyager as Da Vinci.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, I feel like you were talking about this before, how he's just like a staple of the fantasy genre at this point. Like your movie really can't succeed without him being in it if it's a fantasy. Apparently, it's just like a written law somewhere in Hollywood.
Did this succeed? I mean, it got sequels, but I think I don't know if you still have the numbers that it did, but I know the budget was $60 million. And it made what, like 12 or 13?
Oh yeah, about 13 million in box office, I believe, and then it did another 13 in home DVD sales. But I guess the weird thing that made Umable films possible, at least when he was making them in the early 2000s, was that he would do it in conjunction with the German government, and through an interesting tax loophole. Even though the films lost money, he would still get reimbursed from the German government because there was some involvement in German production studios involved in the production.
This
So
feels shady.
yeah. I mean, that was kind of the big thing. Like the movies, they don't stand well enough on their own, but somehow he kept making enough money out of this weird tax loophole to keep doing this.
And I guess what the German government just couldn't say no.
They couldn't. They're like, we need to make sure the German culture and film industry is being distributed and shown to the world.
They're like, this is the only guy that keeps submitting movies, huh?
This is the only guy who keeps filing for the tax credit, okay? Why?
They open up the envelope and they're like, is it from Hasselhoff? No, it's Uwe Boll again.
Just imagine, like, Uma Boll and David Hasselhoff team up to make Spy Hunter the film.
I mean, it'd probably be awesome.
It would probably be great.
Yeah. Because at least, David Hasselhoff, he knows when he's doing a campy movie or a campy project, and he'll play into it, He's in on the joke, and he's a bit of a ham. Whereas in this film, everybody, for the most part, takes it pretty seriously, yet still deliver, like, a lot of the people wooden, phoned-in performances. I guess by taking it seriously, I just mean, like, no one plays it up for laughs, really.
Yeah, I think...
Yeah,
they all kind of play it very flat, with the exception of Matthew Lillard, who's just given his absolute best Shakespearean attempt in terms of being an actor in this one. And his scenes are pretty painful. There's one scene where he's like, my position demands respect. It's real weird. And then there's another one where he's poisoned by Ray Liotta later on in the film, and he's sitting there screaming about how he's dying. And I'm like, that's some great acting there, Matthew.
Yeah, his character's all over the place. Like, I can't tell if it's supposed to be comic relief or if he is supposed to be kind of dastardly. It's weird because, like, the movie sets him up at the beginning to not be taken seriously, but then, like, halfway through it wants you to take him seriously as, like, one of the main villains, and it's kind of hard too. And Matthew Lillard, bless his heart. Like you said, he tries, but he doesn't make it easy. He, like a few other people in this movie, has an accent that's constantly changing. I guess he's trying to do like a Shakespearean
something along those lines.
Accent or something, but it's all over the place. Burt Reynolds does an accent, a Southern accent.
Burt Reynolds plays Burt Reynolds in this film. And it's just, oh man, such an interesting... Yeah, like, I think we've had this discussion before in terms of, like, the casting is just such an interesting choice, where Jason Statham is basically the main vehicle driver for it, so he's our main character.
Yeah, and his performance is fine. It's a Jason Statham performance, but it's fine.
Yeah, it's entirely just how he would play any character in any film, basically.
It's serviceable. So. It's honestly, I feel like he has one of the better performances in the movie. Now, it's probably helped by the fact that he's a guy that, quote unquote, is supposed to, like, not talk a lot, so he doesn't have, like, a ton of dialogue compared to everybody else, I feel like.
Yeah, it sounds like they kept him pretty limited. But, yeah, what's kind of funny is, like, one of the few things that's actually, like, accurate from the game is that the character of Jason Statham's your main character in the film, who's named Farmer. And he's solely named Farmer, because that's kind of in the game when it starts, you're literally just a farmer living with a guy, and then the Grog show, or the Krog, I can remember how you say it.
Krog, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? They kept changing the pronunciation for that too. I feel like, because I feel like sometimes they were called Krug, and other times like they were Krugs.
I feel like this is entirely possible.
Anyways, but they're like rip-off orcs, kind of. At least that's what they kind of end up looking like.
Yeah, it's kind of.
Yeah, or how did you describe me for, like, as Power Ranger?
Yeah, so what I thought was interesting when I went to watch. So I'm one of the few humans who actually went to see this film in theaters back in 2007 when it came out.
Uwe Boll was there.
Yeah, I drug my
taking names.
I drug my now wife, then girlfriend, to this.
Now, when you say drug, do you mean you forced her to go, or you drugged her and made her
forced her to go?
Oh.
It's like, now take your seat, watch the movie with me.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you drugged her, like gave her like a roofie and made her go.
Yeah, that's probably the only way she actually would have come. But So that being said, I got her to go, and then like two of my friends came with me because I'm like, hey, let's go watch this crappy video game movie. And they're like, no, oh, come on, man. I'm like, no, we're going to this movie.
End of your friendship with them, I assume, as well.
Don't hang out with them much anymore. It's probably like emanates from this particular decision I made back in 2007.
Yeah, hard to blame them.
Yeah, but watching this movie in theaters was kind of funny because like it's actually kind of a grand epic spectacle of a film and has some interesting open photography or like open shots of scenery where they clearly mounted an expensive camera to a helicopter and got some scenic shots. So they were trying really hard to be like a Lord of the Rings type film. And it kind of opens like the funniest thing about this is the way they introduce the Krog, who are like your main bad guys, minions. And they introduce him by like Jason Statham's looking around in a field, he's kind of looking around, and then he like bends over, and then it's like right behind him like a ninja and starts fighting him.
Yeah.
But the way these things fought is that they immediately start acting like putties from Power Rangers in the sense that they're not serious. They're kind of trying to act animalistically, but like it's not consistent across all the characters. So some act a little more like, so they march weird, and ultimately it's one of those choices where like it made them really just comedic in that regard. Like they weren't intimidating or scary because they moved so stupid. Like if they were more human in the way they were moving and what they were doing, it would be a more intimidating enemy.
And I think it just comes down to like the direction from Uwe, right, or whatever. Uwe, I think that's a new one. Because I mean, they do establish in the movie that these Krugs or whatever they're called, that they normally don't fight with weapons and that they're more animalistic. I think at one point they said they're more like dogs or something. Yeah. But because our main bad guys, kind of controlling them, they're fighting a little bit more human-like. But like you said, it's inconsistent in terms of how they do that and their movements. And maybe it's because of the suits. Maybe they're restrictive. I don't know. But yeah, they end up looking more like Power Rangers, like, goons or whatever. But
yeah, like putties, yeah.
I guess we might as well get into the plot a little bit. Mm-hmm. I don't think we need to go by it beat by beat, but yeah. I do think we should talk about the very beginning scene.
Ray Liotta making out with
Layli Sobieski,
like 22-year-old Layli Sobieski, or however you say your name, which is kind of a creepy way to open a movie, like in some respects, because it's like Ray Liotta. I think he's like in his maybe 50s or
well, we looked it up. He was 46.
Yeah, 46. Okay, yeah.
And I'm looking at her date of birth here. This came out in 2007, so let's say it was filmed in 2005. She would have been 22.
All right, I was right in my initial guess. Which it's just kind of an odd scene. It's trying to set up like his.
It seems to have been Ray's favorite scene. Certainly the one that he seems to be the most into.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a weird scene. They're like making out and they have this weird flirting. There is a pretty funny line. I thought it was funny where like Layli is like, I'm talking about how she read a poem about love being worth dying for, and she's like, would you die for love? And he's like, yeah, I would die for love in a poem. I don't know why it cracked me up for whatever reason, that line, but yeah, it's really weird. So we kind of learned that this guy he's like an enemy of her father, who ends up being the Magus, which is like the king's magician or magic guy.
Mage or whatever you call that.
Yeah, the Magus. And they belong to the Order of the Magi, and these two are the last Magis, Ray Liotta and Jonathan Rhys-Davies. But yeah, it's just a really strange, uncomfortable, long opening scene where 75% of it is them making out.
Yeah, which is kind of funny because like what you'd say like 90% of your fantasy films that ever come out, the intro is usually some type of title card or something establishing the world, so you at least have some idea of what's going on. Now this one, man, jumps right into Ray Liotta making out with a 22-year-old. This is where it starts.
And then we have the jarring transition to meeting Farmer and establishing his character and his son. We see them farming and pulling out some weird giant vegetable that's the size of a basketball.
And he's like really bad at it.
Yeah.
And then the whole plot point is that Jason Statham's character is named Farmer because it's what he does, and he doesn't want any other name because it's the only name.
But he does have an actual name, which we
We'll spoil that for you here a bit later, yeah.
But yeah, everybody just calls him Farmer. But yeah, so basically we spend like the next, like, God, it felt like 30 minutes, but it was probably more like 10 minutes just kind of establishing who he is, his family, because we also meet his wife, who's played by Carla, what was her name? Claire Forlani. Also probably a little too young for Statham, who we determined was 40 when this was filmed, but still much better than Ray Liotta. But yeah, and there's this weird thing that comes back up later where, like, Farmer and his wife are, like, in bed, like, flirting or something, and she's like, "Oh, tell me that you love me," and he, like, won't do it. He just keeps, like, dancing around it. It's really weird, and it does come back at the very end of the film, so I guess do we give him credit for that, I guess?
I mean, his son doesn't, but yeah, but yeah, and like at this point, yeah, we're introduced to Ron Perlman's character as well.
Oh, right.
He shows him, and it's kind of funny. Like, Ron Perlman usually elevates a lot of the stuff he's in, but in this one, it's like the flattest performance of his I've ever seen, which is kind of intriguing. He's like, he shows up, and it turns out he was the guy who kind of raised Farmer, but Farmer was mostly raised by the entire village community that he's in, which is this seaside farming community. So it's a whole thing, and yeah, like you said, it goes on for about 30 minutes until we finally get to where something happens, in the sense that the wife and son go to a market, and then he's back at the farm, and he's still working on the farm and working on things, and hears something, and then the Krog appears behind him like a ninja, and then one of the most jarring juxtaposes in terms of like how you'd expect a farmer to fight immediately goes into like the fastest high kung fu action you'd ever seen. In terms
He's like
of
a Power Ranger.
Yeah, he's just like a freaking Power Ranger coming out of nowhere and starts hacking up these Krog like they're nothing to him. And my favorite part is that's never explained as to how he has these abilities, aside from like what you were saying is. Well, I guess, do we want to spoil that? Want to spoil the big twist?
Yeah. So it's going to turn out that he's a very special boy. And he's the long-lost son of the king. And yeah, the only way they really... It's not even an explanation, but like... I guess maybe it was them attempting to explain it. Like, the king tells, his son, the farmer, that during a scene later, "Oh, how do you think that you fought so well?" He's trying to convince Jason Statham that he is his son. And he's like, "Why do you think you fought so well?" Because, you inherit fighting skills. It's genetic.
100% genetic. Yeah, and then so that's how they explain him being an absolute ruthless killer in terms of with his sword and also his boomerang, which is kind of revealed to us.
Yeah.
As a thing he uses.
Why didn't they have the king also like use a boomerang?
Oh, that would have been a better time. Burt Reynolds throwing a boomerang would have been pretty funny.
That would have been awesome. I bet he would have like been into it.
Man, Boom Bull needs to hire us for his next In the Name of the King movie. We could hire this
anybody really would be an improvement. But yeah, so eventually, like his wife, farmer's wife, goes to the town next door to sell their weird basketball veggies. And while over there, and farmer doesn't go with her. It's her and the kid that they go. She goes over there, and there we meet her brother, right?
Mm-hmm. Their brother and her parents, yeah.
And her parents. And, they also talk around a table for a while. And, I mean, I do appreciate that they took some time to actually establish characters and try and make you care about them a little bit before anything major happens. So I don't really mind that they did that, even if it dragged a bit. But then the village gets attacked by the Krugs as well.
Krog, yeah.
Or whatever. And I think at this point, this is happening like basically at the same time that Jason Statham was fighting his Krug. And now, like, Jason, after he does finish his fight, he sees that there's smoke, and it's coming from the direction of the city. He it's it's Ron Perlman's barn or something.
Yeah, it's on fire, yeah.
Yeah, his farm. So he goes over there, helps Ron Perlman out. There's a big action scene here. By the way, this is the one action scene that Uwe Boll choreographed.
Okay, yeah, actually, the barn fight scene actually wasn't that bad.
No, it's not that bad.
Which, yeah, I think we've talked about this in the sense that everything in this film, let me just burp there, everything in this film is pretty bad. Like, in terms of the acting, the CG, some of that stuff, it's pretty subpar. But the only thing that is actually like above board is all the action sequences that occur. Like
Yeah.
the fight choreography is actually pretty well on point through the majority of the film, which is kind of really unexpected.
Yeah, and basically the rest of the fight choreography was handled by the stunt coordinator, and whose name I, of course, no longer have. But he was is a really well known guy. I remember like we looked at some of the movies that he's done, previously, and they're like pretty big action films. And he, as far as like the stunt people, they were all like his people and like people that are in his troupe that he's trained. So yeah, the action stuff for the most part is pretty good. Then Ron Perlman and Farmer, they run to the neighboring town where his wife is, and like the crew's already like messing everybody up. Like this kind of goes on for a long time too.
Yeah.
Like the crew's just like murdering and pillaging basically.
Yeah, and I think we had talked about this before, where this begins the sequence of just showing Jason Statham just running in random shots throughout the movie, like just a lot of running that he just randomly does. I guess it would make sense that he's like trying to get somewhere, but the film just uses that as padding to get from scene to scene of just him running.
Yeah. He definitely does a lot of running, and he had like a messed up tendon too while filming this movie. So that's nice that they.
Yeah, I'll go back through the footage and see if I can find him limping at all in some of the running scenes, because it's just like,
that'd be great.
That's a fun little tidbit. Yeah, because I guess the big deal is like, Jason Statham kind of insisted on doing his own stunts for this film, which is like, oh, okay, man. But like,
Yeah.
do you really want to get hurt for In the Name of the King?
Yeah, which I mean, it's I guess kudos to him for doing that, and all his action stuff looks good. He's a physical guy. But anyways, during this big like scene where they're fighting the Kroogs of this town, like his son gets killed, and then we get like a scene where like the Kroogs are done and they just kind of leave.
So walk off. Well, because it's like in this fight scene, we're introduced to the fact that Ray Liotta is controlling the Kroog through these little like officer Kroogs basically that are controlling them, and that's like they're the focal points. So Jason Statham starts like targeting them because he knows, and then it kind of culminates in this fight where they're inside his in-laws' house fighting the Kroog. He tells his son to run. Son doesn't escape, gets killed. It's Ray Liotta murders his kid, so that gives some motivation. But his wife gets taken by the Krug because apparently that's a thing they do for some reason, which is never.
They
really
want to use them as
explained.
slaves, which
which
doesn't make sense.
Really doesn't.
Because they establish Ray Liotta himself says that he can make as many Kroogs as he wants.
Summon more, yeah.
Maybe they're just too dumb. Because he does have to control them to get them to like fight properly. So he'd probably have to control them to like mine properly.
Got to use like micromanaging.
What does he need slaves for?
He has
What are they
these
even
things.
doing? Like, are they mining precious minerals that he's selling to like a world power somewhere? What's going on here?
There's no explanation to the Krug economy and how it actually works or functions in terms of supporting his operations. It's clear they have some type of economy going because they have really, crappy armor that they're wearing now, which they didn't wear before. So they're making it to some capacity.
Okay. See, I thought Ray Liotta had summoned that too, but that makes more sense. Maybe they're like mining the metals to make them or something.
Maybe, yeah, because my interpretation of what was going on is the Krug are a race of people that exist in the world, a kingdom of Ebb, and he is basically molesting them to work in his purview, so he's controlling them that way,
Right,
so he's
right.
summoning them. And I think they're like just maybe some kind of weird reptile that can reproduce in large numbers, but it's normally dumb and harmless. So he's like summoning them to him because they're so weak-minded.
Yeah,
is
they're
my interpretation.
They're not harmless because they do mention that they fight them.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but they fight like dogs.
But they're just not usually like like
organized.
Yeah, organized and fighting like people. But yeah, his son gets killed. There's some kind of a funeral. I'm trying to remember. Like they bury him. They wrap him in something.
Yeah, he buries his son under rocks, and he's like, I will get revenge. And it's like trying to be sad and stoic, but it's just Jason Statham playing it pretty flat, unfortunately.
Yeah, he's like, I will get my revenge.
I'll get my revenge. And then, kind of like, I guess they were trying to channel that gladiator thing, where he's like, I will get my revenge in this life and the next, but they didn't really quite go that hard.
But
he's like,
they forgot that they don't have Russell Crowe.
Can you imagine if they got Russell Crowe for this movie? It'd be great.
That would have been hilarious.
Yeah.
I bet he would have been all over it if they could afford him.
Well, I mean, he wasn't working too hard in 2007, was he? Or was he still big? I guess he was still kind of big.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good point.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's weird. Like everybody kind of, it is supposed to be like a sad scene, but I also feel like they get over like the son's death pretty quickly.
Yeah, the son is just like, oh well, and they just move on like a like a pretty normal.
Yeah.
Thing. Like because they only mention like getting revenge for his son like one other time, and that's like towards the end. It's like the only other time that I caught it, and yeah, and this kind of. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say there was a scene earlier with the king that I think we skipped over where he kind of the king is informed about the Kriegs attacking.
Yeah.
This is where we're also introduced to Matthew Lillard's character, who's the nephew of the king, and he's just like a spoiled rich brat, basically. Mm-hmm. And yeah, this is when we're also introduced. Oh no, we're not. Are we introduced to like the guy that runs the king's army here?
Yeah, we are in that scene. Yeah, like he shows up and. There's a kind of a weird disagreement between. It's already established that Matthew Lillard and that character don't like each other, right. So it's kind of a thing that's going on. And I feel like there's another scene in there where that the king's general is training the female magi to fight.
Yeah.
And that's a whole thing about that where he's trying to like teach her, but her father, who's the main magi, doesn't want her involved in it for some reason. Yeah.
So that scene, like you said, it establishes that the nephew and the general don't like each other. And the king figures out that, like, oh, this must be some kind of magic if the Krug are fighting like people. And, yeah, we do also get that scene with Lily Sobieski, where she's being taught how to fight by the general. But, and she's really good. He says something about, like, oh, you're really good. And, but, like, she's like, yeah, but my dad won't let me fight.
Yeah, that's a whole thing.
Yeah, but she's also training in magic, so why is she?
Well, I don't
fighting with a sword.
Well, it seemed like her dad didn't know she could do magic, but it was kind of funny. So, like I was telling you, that I found because I watched the 2-hour version, but I found the 3-hour. Basically, yeah, like 3 hour, 2 hour, 55-minute version, which that scene actually has expanded stuff in it to where it actually shows like Matthew Lillard kind of giving her crap for wearing armor like a man. And so there's a whole thing there where I'm sure like I'm not going to sit down and watch the 3-hour version, but there's more little tidbits in there, and I'm like, okay, that probably pads out the film better and explains things. But
so you're saying if you're going to watch In the Name of the King, you should watch the 3-hour version?
Make sure you watch the 3-hour version, because I'm sure there's some serious cinema stuff in there.
But you should.
You should, yeah. We've talked about the film for about 3 hours collectively now.
Yeah.
So
yeah. But anyways, then the king and the general or whatever, they all end up going over to the town where farmer's son got killed and his wife got kidnapped, and they try to basically recruit people for the army because they're like, hey, we need more men. And farmer turns his back on the king and says, nope, I can't remember what he says, but he's basically like not wanting to join up with them because he's gonna fight him on his own, because that seems like a good strategy.
Yeah. And then the magi notices something special about our special little boy. And he sees Ron Perlman, and it sparks a memory in his mind where he's like, and so he goes and basically gets inquisitive of Ron Perlman about the character Farmer, and somehow knows his name without ever asking his actual name. But
he's that good at farming. He's known throughout the kingdom.
Known throughout the kingdom as a farmer.
Yeah.
And that starts.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and that starts the whole adventure of him like basically going after the Krug army. So like him, Ron Perlman, and his brother-in-law set off. So they have like one horse, but then they come to a ravine and they have to zip line across it, which ends comedically because only our special boy makes it across, and then Ron Perlman and the brother-in-law get trapped and fall into a river, which then sparks another montage of Jason Statham running a lot,
running down a big hill.
Yeah, running down a big hill.
And like it turns out that there was like no reason for them to even like really cross that ravine. The only reason why I can think that, because basically what ends up happening is the two guys that fall, Ron Perlman and the brother-in-law, they land in the river, but once they land, the river's not like dangerous. There's no big current. It's not even that deep because they're able to like just walk right out of it. And it only takes Jason Statham like a few seconds to come all the way down from the top down to the riverbed. So why were they even going like this dangerous route?
It's just one of those like just padding things because.
Sorry, I was gonna say the only thing I can think of is that maybe if they had taken, if they had all three been able to cross that rope bridge or whatever, then they wouldn't have had to go through the forest, I guess. Because they cut through the forest with those.
I guess they kind of set that up to where like, oh, because you fell in the river, I had to go this way, didn't they?
That doesn't make sense because Jason just came down from the place they wanted to go. Just go up.
Yeah.
But yeah, they end up like saying, well, we got to cut through the forest, and I don't know, Ron Perlman or the brother-in-law, I can't remember who's like, oh, they see that there's like things in the forest, and of course, eventually they run into what those things are, and they're just like women in scantily clad. I guess they're kind of like elves.
Yeah, I guess like plant elves, but like, but the lead elf is played by the actress that played the Blood Rain character from that film. So that's a whole nother Umble throwback to his cinematic universe, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, Christina Loken is her name.
But yeah, it's just almost like that entire scene is just set up to basically like, oh, we have a later scene where we have to throw Jason Statham across a ravine, and we need these vine people to do it.
Yeah,
but even then it was done with a rope. So I think that was maybe just lazy writing and them trying to connect the dots at a later point. Like, oh, we need to meet these people in order to facilitate this shot later. Mm-hmm. Maybe, which is I guess them trying to think of some things ahead. But yeah, kind of a silly no point shot, which then kind of transitions into Burt Reynolds marching his army back to the castle, and he sees Matthew Lillard there with only one guard on post, and then goes into the castle and kind of berates him for being a terrible nephew and a terrible leader. And so that kind of sets up him being upset with the king to go ahead and like accelerate his plans with Ray Liotta, which begins that whole poisoning thing.
Yeah, and Ray Liotta's playing like, he's very much a mustache twirling villain. It's just like his delivery, like there's a few times where he's supposed to do like an evil, like ha 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 ha, kind of big evil villain laugh, but instead he just goes ha ha ha. Like it's very, like you said earlier, very flat.
Yeah, Ray Liotta is like clearly there for a paycheck and to make out with a 22-year-old girl.
Yeah, and at this point, there's already been some CG special effects. I know, like, I found them to be mostly decent with some bad ones. I think the compositing is what's really bad in this movie. Anytime a green screen is used, like, I mean, oof, you can tell it is not good. Go ahead.
Yeah, because we had in my notes about this, I talked about because some shots, especially some of the ones involving the vines in the movie, look like they're straight out of a 1995 made-for-TV NBC movie. So pretty bad graphics, but yeah, but then there are other shots that are not too bad. They're okay. They have a lot of decent like practical effects shots, which happen later in the film, which are actually not too bad. But there is that one castle shot, which is kind of weird because it's like this static PNG of a castle with the army kind of arrayed in front of it. And I think you and I were talking how it has, maybe there's like some kind of weird warp effect they're using on the castle to transition from the horse going around to the front of the line.
Yeah, there might have been something.
But yeah, I think we need to, I'll edit that in here. We can kind of just talk about that later. But yeah, it's just something that kind of just looked really weird in terms of some of the special effects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the way I remember it, like the castle doesn't really change. So the camera's panning from right to left. And this is it's a pretty short scene. It's like 5 seconds or something, the panning part. But it's like the castle doesn't change perspective. So, the scene looks fine if you're not looking at the castle, but unfortunately the castle is also kind of comped in awkwardly on top of that. Like the lighting isn't quite right, so it really sticks out. So pretty bad VFX shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think you and I were like saying last time, why did they even have the camera pan if they weren't gonna, do a real CG element there with a perspective shift?
Yeah.
Why even move the camera? Yeah. But I know that there were like several, according to Uwe like basically some of the companies that they had like hired to do the special effects, they like subcontracted other VFX companies that were basically turning in really bad effects. So then they had to like get other VFX companies to like redo some shots. So it may be that they just didn't have money for some of this, is my theory, for some of these shots that look poorly comped, and they're like, screw it, just anytime that they could like just take like a still PNG and try and comp it in and just keyframe it, they're like, do it.
Yeah, and then another like kind of a funny thing was because this movie was filmed like almost entirely in Canada, from what I understand. So pretty much any castle they could get for this, they had to build either like small enclosure sets or like little probably quarter sets, and then like CG the rest in. But I'm like, if you're using the German government, why aren't you filming some of the exterior castle shots like in Germany?
Yeah, well, I guess they'd have to get the crew over there for some of that stuff. But
yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's this interesting little thing there, tidbit I was thinking about the movie. I'm like, okay, I mean, like, yeah, Europe has tons of castles. Why not use some practical shots? But whatever.
Yeah, like it would have made more sense to me to go shoot like some practical stuff there, and then comp in the horses.
Yeah.
You know, whatever. But what are you gonna do?
Yeah, what are you going to do? Yeah, and then the whole thing here kind of, we're probably skipping a fair amount of pieces here, but basically, once the whole Ray Liotta and Matthew Lillard plan are set in motion, begins by poisoning the king because they have dinner together to try and, like, well, the king and Matthew Lillard have kind of a make-up breakfast together, and they get poisoned, and that accelerates to where Matthew Lillard gets the cure from Ray Liotta, which then spurs him to go and take 2/3 of the legions off to basically join the Krug to fight the general, because clearly the general guy was who poisoned them, so that's the whole plot.
Yeah, that's Matthew Lillard's big plan, that he's going to go fight the general and say, like, oh, you poisoned the king, and Matthew Lillard, of course, would be the heir to the throne.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, killing two birds with one stone. He gets the throne, and he gets rid of the general guy that he can't stand.
Yeah. So it kind of goes in that direction with it, with kind of Jason Statham going off on his own and having a scene where he meets up with the caravan holding his wife, but then he gets knocked out. And then Ray Liotta notices that Farmer is a special boy somehow and tries to, like, hang him.
Yeah. Well, Ray Liotta is you know, controlling like the lead Krug or whatever, and is, like you said, about to hang Jason Statham, and he has like this speech where he's like, I can see most men, I can read most men like a book, why can't I see anything past your scowl? What's different about you, special boy? I wish that's how that would have ended.
That would have been a way better scene, actually, if it had gone that way. Really, Liotta saying "special boy" would have been.
And instead of Farmer, the rest of the movie, they just start calling him "special boy." But yeah, so he goes to hang him, but I can't remember how. But Jason Statham like somehow
like he
cuts the rope and
flails, grabs his. Basically, the guy's sword off him, and then hits his neck, and then the rope.
Yeah, cuts his head off,
and then our good friend the Magi shows up, and then be like, I know the king. You are more important to the king than he knows, and then brings him into the camp because the king has recovered now, but like he's gonna die. But the Magi gave him just enough strength to like make it later. So the king is there with the rest of the legion to go and try and basically fight Matthew Lillard, and they link them up, and this is where the grand plot reveal occurs of. Jason Statham is the long-lost son of the king. Right.
But, and I kind of like this, neither Jason Statham nor the king really kind of buy it at first.
Mm-hmm.
And they do both have to kind of be convinced as the movie goes, and the king kind of comes around to it first, and then the king is the one that finally gets Jason Statham's character to believe it. So I do like the way that they handle that, and I will say that there's competent ideas here, and they do some things right, like, okay, introduce plot point, resolve plot point. You know, introduce plot point connected to this other plot point. Because by the end, like, because there's a lot of, like, threads going on. Statham wants to rescue his kidnapped wife and family or whatever. You've got, like, the king and the nephew who are, like, battling for the throne. Then you've got Ray Liotta, who also wants the throne, but is also fighting with the Magus from the kingdom. Then you've also have the relationship between Jason Statham and Burt Reynolds. The actors, not even the characters, the actors. They were dating briefly during this. But anyways, and then Matthew Lillard and the general, they don't like each other, and also the plot point of Lily Sobieski's character, how she wants to like fight, and she's like good at sword fighting and blah 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 blah. So there's all these threads, and much to my surprise, by the end they all do come together.
Yeah, they actually. That was kind of the most surprising thing about the end of The Name of the King. Was this is probably among Uma Bohl's more competent like video game movies in terms of how the plot threads actually they do come together at certain points. We're like, okay, that worked out. Like where we get to the first battle, the major battle of the film, where Matthew Lillard's on the field with his armies, and then they have this whole speech. He's like, oh well, I'm the true king, and then all of a sudden, the general's standing there opposed to them, and then Burt Reynolds joins, and then basically all the legions defect back to the king because they didn't know he was still alive. So it has some good moments there. Like, that's kind of a fun little thing.
There's a bunch of really good ideas here. I think the main problem is there's a lot of main problems, but one of the main problems to me is that they've got these good ideas for like plot points and ways to like tie them all together, but the dialogue itself in the actual script is bad. It's like Star Trek Discovery. They'll come up with like a good idea for like a season-long arc, but then all the dialogue in between.
Just the writing doesn't come together.
The writing itself is just terrible.
But so kind of going from there into the like talking about this film in terms of how it fails in a lot of areas, CG and dialogue and writing and all that. But then the fight scenes are actually competent. They're fun and interesting in terms of the way it goes. And so it kind of goes into that first battle to where
it's in the woods. We should mention that because that's important for later.
Yeah. But the first major reveal I thought of this battle that was the most hysterical was Burt Reynolds and his special ninjas that work directly for the king.
Yeah, so they're fighting in the woods, and by they I mean the king's unified army are gonna fight the Krugs or whatever. Mm-hmm. And like very early, like what ends up happening first is like the king's people throw arrows. And the arrow scenes look great to me, by the way.
Yeah, those look good. Yeah, but the funniest part though is so like he deploys the ninjas out as like an early warning thing. So like they show like the claws on their paws, and they climb up the tree, and they have these little bell arrows that they shoot to warn of the incoming Krug army. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of
and at one point we see like a ninja like foot like jump to like using a tree to like parkour off of it, and they do a close up shot on his foot, and sure enough he's wearing like your traditional like ninja
the toe shoes,
the toe shoes, and
I think back to myself, I'm like, what was that in the games? Was that at all? No, I don't believe that was all in the games.
Man, what if it was, and that's why they did it?
It turns out Uma Bohl is actually
Uma Bohl's just a better gamer.
he's way more accurate to the source material, and that's why the ninjas are there.
But this fight in the woods, it goes on for a really long time, and one of the things that had impressed me was the amount of extras, because all the fights, like they're not, it's not like a CG fight like in Lord of the Rings. It's so obviously it's not that many either, because in Lord of the Rings it looked like there's like hundreds of thousands, right, of people. But I will say, man, in this opening fight, they do like this crazy long panning shot across like throughout the woods as they're fighting, and there's just all these guys fighting, and the shot goes on and on and on. And because I don't know about you, but I thought this is gonna be a real quick pan. They're gonna show like all the extras fighting. I'm thinking they probably have like 100 extras. We're gonna get them in this short panning shot, and that's it. But it pans for like almost 45 seconds, a minute, and it felt like there were thousands of people like in this fight the way that they shot it.
Yeah,
and it's one shot. Kudos to Uwe.
Yeah, and I will definitely give him props for the fact that it was pretty much every shot was all practical actors for the most part. There really wasn't any CG that I could tell of that increased the size or volume of the army.
No, the fight seemed to be like just all real people.
Yeah, so that was kind of a nice little change of pace from a lot of other films that I'd seen around that era, because I think Lord of the Rings had just finished up in terms of Return of the King came out, I think, a couple years before. So you kind of had that flavor in your mouth going into this one. I
told you before, I actually liked the fights in The Name of the King better than the big army fights in Lord of the Rings, because it felt more visceral, like more real, because it was real people. Because those Lord of the Ring fights, they look good. But they also look like a CG animated thing.
Yeah, like less personal, I guess you could argue.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I will put this out there though, that the battle scenes in The Name of the King get progressively way sillier the longer it goes, with the tunnel rat Krugs, digging across the field really quickly to drag people under, which was hilarious.
Yeah.
And then my favorite
Is that a
note,
thing that they do in the game? Maybe.
I can't, I haven't played Dungeon Siege in probably over 20 years, so that's kind of a that's a good
I'll
one.
try. I'll try and see if I can find out as we're recording this, because I'm kind of curious.
My favorite note, though, I wrote Krugapults, to where the Krugs are using catapults, and they're loading these exploding boulders into it, but then they run out of those, but they can start loading Krugs into them and then setting them on fire.
Yeah, they voluntarily walk into the launcher and let them get set on fire.
And they land, and then they start hugging people when they land, and it's just like that's funny as hell.
It was pretty funny. It was pretty funny.
I have a hard time believing anyone except the fight choreographer was taking themselves seriously making this.
That's probably accurate. But yeah, this fight goes on for a really, really long time. Eventually, everybody is wearing armor except for Jason Statham. He's just wearing a tunic or something, like a blouse, basically.
Still wearing his same farmer's tunic, and he's like, you're just here with your random trash sword and boomerang. All right.
And but all his stuff looks great. I really like the general, all his action sequences. The guy that played him did a really, really good job with all the sword fights and stuff. But I mean, all the fights look good.
Yeah, all the choreography's good.
And I really like that, unlike Putty's, when they show Statham in the fight, he's having to fight off several, crews off at once, and he's constantly having to move. Man, I was just some of the sequences, I was like, man, he must have gotten blown up, as what they would call it in wrestling, when you're out of breath, during a match or something. Mm-hmm. But anyway, they end up defeating the Krugs. I think the same thing happens, right? Where Statham or somebody cuts off the main guy's head, but this time Ray Liotta's like, "Oh, you've won nothing but time," or something like that.
Yeah. My camera froze up, but it's still recording. We're good. Don't know why.
Okay.
Yeah, Ray Liotta's like, "Oh, you've won nothing but time. I can summon more." So it's kind of not a big deal for him.
Yeah, it's like a hollow victory. But and then it's after this fight. After the fight, it's during the fight, during the end of the fight, we see Matthew Lillard is trying to shoot arrows at the king.
Oh, that's right.
And he keeps missing. He's really bad. And you put it out when we talked about it before, that at one point the king notices that arrows are being fired at him. One zips by in front of him, and he's like, "Huh?" And then he looks straight at Matthew Lillard, but doesn't tell anybody, doesn't move, doesn't do anything.
He knows he's shooting at him and does absolutely nothing.
I guess he's so bad that he just doesn't expect him to actually hit him. But
then he's just super excited that it works out.
Yeah, eventually one of the arrows goes straight into, basically right at the end of the fight, one of the arrows goes straight into the heart of the king. Everybody, including Matthew Lillard and the king, are hilariously surprised about it. And it's well, I mean, you had to assume if you waited long enough. Broken clock is right twice a day, man.
Yeah. And that kind of goes into our later scene where basically the battle is lost for the Krug. Matthew Lillard's character flees the field and is chased by the Magi and eventually captured by our friendly fairy Ivy people, who then bring him back. And there's actually a pretty fun fight scene between the general and Matthew Lillard, where actually it's pretty clear that Matthew Lillard is he's giving it his all, and I'm you know what, I can appreciate that, Matthew. I'm glad you're trying real hard.
And I think, and it was a really hard sword fight, I would think, for Matthew Lillard, because Matthew Lillard needed to both make it look good, he's really in a sword fight, but also he's supposed to be a guy that's not really good at sword fighting. That they had established that earlier too. Actually, just before he fights him, he's says, "Can I at least have a lick of wine before you kill me?" Because he knows he has no chance against him. And the other guy's basically kind of toying with him, but yeah, they made it look really good. And then eventually, obviously, the general ends up getting him down. We should mention, before this fight, the king and Farmer, Burt Reynolds and Statham, have their big scene, because the king is dying now. And they have like this big heart-to-heart where I read that apparently Burt Reynolds, because he had never played a character that died before, he extensively rewrote this death scene because he wanted it to be special, just like his boy, a special little boy.
my special boy. Yeah.
So yeah, it goes on a really long time, but I do feel like it added like, you know, like some kind of needed character stuff and information. Like Burt Reynolds at one point he starts saying some saying, and then Farmer finishes it, and he's like, "Oh, where'd you hear that saying?" He's like, and Burt said, "I used to say that all the time to my son."
I love how Burt just plays Burt. I mean,
my special boy.
Yeah, and basically what's kind of funny is if Burt Reynolds had to rewrite this scene to make it more special, and he added the whole bit about seaweed that was kind of just awkward. Imagine how bad it was before that.
Oh god,
like,
the seaweed, yeah, like, yeah, and that like blows Jason Statham's mind. Basically, Burt Reynolds is like, "Oh, you should, when you're king, you should plant crops here." He's like, "Well," and Farmer's like, "No, that soil's terrible." He's like, No, my boy. You see, the seaweed that comes in from the ocean tide will make it work." And then Farmer's like, "How do you know this?"
Okay, when you're king, you know these things. Then he kind of does that, just dies, and it does that awkward cut back to
I don't think it's quite there that it happens, but that is basically what happens. But yeah, they have a heart-to-heart, and, you know, basically like Jason Statham finally accepts and believes that he's, you know, the king's son. This is also when the king tells Jason Statham's character, like, "Oh, to try to convince him that he's his son. Why do you think you're so good at fighting? Look at me. Look at your old man who got hit by an arrow in the heart after watching 10 of them miss him.
After watching Matthew Lillard shoot at me for an hour.
I'm a skilled fighter." But, you know, now that you mentioned that, and I had read it too, that in the longer cut of the movie, there's a lot more character stuff. I wonder if Burt Reynolds, because I mean, the guy is, you know, a veteran, right? If he was thinking, this is way too long. They're gonna cut a bunch of that other character stuff, but I know that they can't cut this scene too much if I write it in a way where, you know, this flows into this. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's part of the reason why he rewrote it.
You know that. There's probably a good chance of it, I bet. I don't know. Like, skimming through the 3-hour cut, there certainly are other little random tidbits that I found throughout it just by skimming it briefly. Not too emotionally invested in going through and actually finding them all, but there's.
I'm surprised no one's uploaded like something like the other 30 minutes.
Well, what makes me laugh so hard about In the Name of the King is that it's not available on streaming anywhere. You can't actually buy it. Like you can buy the DVD on Amazon.
You can rent it on Amazon too.
Oh, you can? Okay, I couldn't find it. I
That's
ended up
what
watching.
I did. It was like $2.
I found so on YouTube you can watch the movie for free.
God damn it!
It's just there, just right there. The full version, the full 2-hour cut is right there on YouTube.
See,
you can watch
I didn't
it
even
free.
check YouTube. Like Steve and I, for our podcast, since we watch like really old stuff that a lot of these companies are out of business. Like half the time, like the movies are on YouTube. But I didn't even think to check for this one because it's a real movie.
Well, because normally like I'll rent or buy on YouTube. It's just easier because then I can like download it to my phone and then just watch it. But this one, no, it was this 720p version was just available on YouTube for free, and nobody cares apparently.
Well, at least I gave Uwe Boll some money. Mm-hmm. I'm sure he gets like half a penny or something.
I imagine he's like, yes. The movie, like maybe your rental was what finally made the movie break even. Like they put it over the top for all this time.
A special red phone starts ringing at Jason Statham's house. Jason Statham it's just like, "No, it can't be.
We've done it. That means I'm contractually obligated to make In the Name of the King 4."
Yeah, Uwe Boll on the other end. It's done. Statham slowly puts the phone down. A tear rolls down his wife's side because he knows what he must do. Oh my god.
Yeah, but back to the story plot here. But Burt Reynolds dies, does that whole awkward, funny cut, and then we cut basically between that and Matthew Lillard, who then, at the end of the fight, is defeated by the general. The general's about to kill him. He's like, someone shouts out, "The king is dead!" And then Matthew Lillard's like, "You can't kill your king now," because he's the next one in line for the throne.
Right.
Stands up and
so dumb. Like, you would just kill the guy. Anyway.
Yeah, just kill him anyway. You be the king. Be the guy that is the guy who sits in the throne until you find somebody
You'll
else. Right?
figure it out later. Like,
Yeah, but nobody would blame you. And then Matthew Lillard stands up and does this really funny, just terrible, like, "All hail the king, hip hip huzzah!" And it's like, and no one says anything, and it's just this great awkward moment.
Yeah,
I appreciate.
It's pretty funny. It's pretty funny. And then we see John Rhys Davies, aka the Magus. Is it Magus or Magus? Magus, right?
Magus, I think Magus, yeah.
He rolls up with Farmer, and he's like, "Yes, it's true. The king is dead, and the new king is." Then drum roll.
Farmer.
Farmer. He says his real name. It's like something with a C. I don't know. Clonopin.
I didn't actually.
That's a medicine.
Known
Actually,
to some of you
It's good
as
Quaalude.
Farmer.
I think Clonopin is a medication.
I didn't even dedicate that to memory when I was watching that scene. I'm like, I don't care enough.
Yeah, Clonopin is the brand name of clonazepam. It's used to control seizures. In
like
the seizure of the king.
All
Anyway.
the flashing lights.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
then,
yes, so they say whatever his name is. I think it was like Camden something. And Jason Statham does a big speech here to like rally the troops. And we had talked earlier when we first recorded this, or you recorded it, that the general gave like a rah-rah speech earlier in the film to
that's right.
But it was to his troops, but it was kind of like crappy. It was like a rah-rah speech before the first big fight.
But it was like we'll win here because we're men, and everyone's like, yeah. It was like just a terrible speech.
Yeah, he's like, what are they? They're beasts. We're men. Like, okay.
Yeah. And what's sad is that the general character, like his performance throughout the film, is actually pretty.
It's good.
It's pretty good. But that battle sequence, like, rallying the men was like probably the lowest part of his performance, unfortunately. But it's like, what do you do with that material, though? It was garbage.
Yeah. And you can tell like that at least he seemed to be like a newer actor that was like, because he's trying really hard. He's like, okay, this is my big break kind of a thing. He wanted to like make an impression. I think he thought, plus he's on this film with, Burt Reynolds, this like huge cast,
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, I'm looking at his IMDb, and he had been in quite a few films, but a lot of these are like look like they're like low budget things, and he's like student number one or such and such on credits, so very small parts for the most part.
Yeah, and for I guess to his credit, a lot of the fight scenes that he was in, he did.
Yeah,
pretty
he's
well.
doing them.
Yeah, he was going hard. So there was that nice element to his performance.
Yes, he was really good at all the physical stuff, and he's had like a super long career since then. He's still acting, and he was most recently on 12 episodes of a miniseries this year called The Black Hamptons. He was also in something else called The Rookie this year, some TV show. He's got like a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I guess good for him. His career survived in the name of the king. So that's,
he was a good actor.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and then.
But go ahead.
Yeah, because then from that moment on, we're kind of.
Statham does his speech.
Yeah, Statham does his speech, and then
which is
rolls
way better.
Yeah, it's kind of actually not too bad. And then from there, we roll on to their plan to finally attack Ray Liotta in his fortress, and they kind of start surmising what they need to do because they're like, "Why are we going to go rescue your queen?" And then basically, Jason Statham tells the general guy to shut up, and he kind of like gets put in his place so bad he just turns around and walks out of the tent.
Yeah.
It explained so basically that it was just funny.
Like the Magus is like, you idiot. Yeah, because the general doesn't want to go. He thinks it's dumb to like just risk people to rescue her. And then Magus is like, you idiot. To rescue her, we have to kill Ray Liotta. If we kill Ray Liotta, the war's over. Fine, I'm out of here.
I think he just turns around and leaves. You're like, it was just a funny scene in terms of like, just like, okay, so I guess he had to be the foil for that scene to work. So they just picked him.
Yeah. Although I feel like they could have just explained it to him. He could have just been like, okay, do you guys have a plan? Or, what are your orders? And he might have been like, and you could still have him protest a little bit or be like, well, do we really want, no offense, but do we really want to risk whatever? But he was just,
Yeah.
no, this is stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, so then they come up with that daring plan, basically. The Magi knows he can get into the fortress because he's magic and go in.
Yeah, he's going to, like, turn himself into, like, little particles and float into the...
Go through the walls.
Yeah.
And that's the whole plan. Then we need the elf people to basically help. And then she goes with Jason Statham and his Magi, and then the girl, I can never remember her name, the female Magi, she's like, I'm going to go with you. And he's like... And
Lily Sobieski or whatever.
Yeah, and then Jason Statham's like, or I think the father protests her coming, and then Jason Statham's like, well, if you can fight, I need you, or whatever. And so, like, he's no problems. She's coming with him because he doesn't care.
Yeah.
And that's where we go.
Well,
and then
well, she was the one that captured Matthew Lillard.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Earlier. So she had already kind of proven herself. She was wearing her armor. And so she had already kind of proven herself to be capable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we knew she's a worthwhile character in the story. Jason Statham at this point. And so it kind of progresses. The human army decides to deploy on like a ridge, basically. And for some reason, it's pitch black and raining. Don't know why that happened. But then the immediately next shot is Jason Statham and them walking on a very sunny, bright hilltop.
Yeah, it's very weird. And when they get to the hilltop, which they're basically going to, magically travel, or Magus is going to magically travel from there into the Krug Tower, castle, whatever. Yeah, it's very poorly composited. Like they green screened it outside, and it looks. But they're outside, but they use a green screen. So it just looks weird. And my theory was that they basically the Krug fight, because it takes place in the forest again. They couldn't have it be at daytime because they needed to look like different.
A different fight, yeah.
What's the cheapest way to make it look different? Just wait 8 hours for the sun to set, and now you've got a different set, kind of.
Yeah.
But they had the lighting from this real sun for the green screen, and it probably just didn't look good compositing like night behind them. So that's my theory. There's no evidence of anything. Just my own experience with keyframe. or keying out
with key light. Yeah, and so it's kind of funny in that regard because there is a shot later where it shows them panning over the hilltop and going down to the valley, going through like some magic fog to where it's dark and black. And like, okay, maybe that's their rationale.
Yeah, they at least tried a little something of a transition, but
yeah,
and
then it progresses basically. So the humans and the Krug start fighting. It's a kind of a fun, long drawn out fight scene. You have the vine people flying across the top.
Yeah,
of the battle,
the women decide, because earlier after they said like, oh, we don't want to get involved in your little wars. This time they're like, well, if we don't help you stop them, they're gonna come after our woods next. So we'll help you this time.
Yeah, so you got that whole alliance coming together thing going on in the film with them fighting together. So like, okay. And then the story kind of progresses to where the main Magi, basically, force moves through the wall.
Yeah, well, he basically turns into like little particles, like when Spider-Man dies and says, "I don't feel so good, Mr. Stark." It's the same effect basically, but like in 2007, and it looks really
good. Yeah,
it's a particle effect, and it looks really good. Not only the way that they made him transition into the particles, but also the way they have the particles go through the walls, like go through all the cracks of the brick and like spread out and then like recongeal. Yeah, I thought like the effects from here forward, except for one, are pretty well done.
Yeah, and it kind of goes into a magic fight between Ray Liotta and our main Magi guy, where like they're making swords fly and fight each other, and it's kind of like, okay, it's kind of a fun little sequence. I can't say the CG swords hold up too well today, but it's a fun idea because it's done in the same vein as like that scene in Lord of the Rings where Gandalf is fighting Saruman, and so it's kind of got that whole like two powerful wizards fighting each other kind of vibe going for it. And it's not bad. They're both kind of. This is actually like Ray Liotta, I think, is actually hamming it up a bit, and it's a bit better of a scene where he's kind of bouncing off that actor because they're both good actors. So it was kind of nice to me.
My guess is like Ray Liotta knows that John Rhys Davis, because John Rhys Davis doesn't really phone it in. He always puts in like a good performance. Yeah. And my guess is Ray Liotta didn't want to like either look bad or maybe out of respect for John Rhys Davies, you know. So yeah, you can tell Ray Liotta's a little bit more animated here.
Yeah. So it had that going, but then it kind of does a thing where you think our main Magi guy is going to win the fight and cuts the sword in half, but then all of a sudden the swords like go through him in this kind of crazy magic way and it kills him. And so then we cut to a scene where Jason Statham is being launched across the ravine to grab the cliff on a rope.
Yeah, this is the last bad special effect.
Yeah, this is the last bad one where you're like, oh, that's just him in front of... It almost looked like they just rotoscoped him out.
I think they just took a still image and just like warped it and moved and you know, keyframed its movement.
Yeah, and then and around this time, Ron Perlman had been captured, and then he's breaking out with his Jason Statham brother-in-law, and then Ron Perlman decides to just kill himself out of the movie by like stabbing himself through an enemy sword and then taking him out. And it's this real painful scene where he's like, you always did want to go out valiantly.
Yeah, it's so stupid. It's so dumb, but
I think, yeah.
You know, I guess they had to kill somebody off.
Yeah,
I'm kind of surprised it wasn't the brother-in-law because he didn't have a whole lot to do. But
yeah, you would have thought they would have kept Ron Perlman because you know.
Yeah,
but yeah, from then on, like the Krog then take Jason Statham's wife to Ray Liotta, who realizes that she's pregnant with the farmer's son, who's the next king.
He can just tell.
Yeah, so he just knows at that point.
Yeah, he used a plan. No, wait, that's when you want to get rid of it. What's the test? What's the pregnancy test?
Oh, DNA test or whatever.
No,
23 and meet it. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Oh my God. Well, I gotta think of a pregnancy test brand here that we can get. Maybe we can get a.
What's the one you can play Doom?
Clear
on?
Blue. That's a famous one, right?
Sure.
he's like a human Clear Blue, basically.
That's the spell he knows.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's kind of a revealed thing. But then Jason Statham begins wandering around after he gets over there, and then goes and initiates a fight with Ray Liotta. Which it's kind of funny though. Like Ray Liotta just fought a giant magic battle with our other guy, to then just basically fights a normal fight against Jason Statham to where he barely uses any magic until the end.
Yeah, and the very first time he does use magic, you know, Statham's like, "Oh, you're not fighting fair," or "Where's your honor?" You know. So then he stops using magic until like kind of the end. There's like this, you know, he starts throwing Statham around, and he does this thing because the set that they're fighting in is pretty cool actually. It's sort of like a
ancient library,
gothic medieval library, like a combination. It's like if there was a library in a Castlevania level.
Oh yeah, I could see that. Yeah,
like actually, anytime most of the sets that they use for like Ray Liotta's lair reminded me of Castlevania. But anyways, so there's all these books like flying around in a tornado kind of thing or around Farmer and lifts him in the air. Then he uses like books to like pin him down, so he's like in a T pose, you know.
Yeah, his arms are crossed. You just stab him.
Yeah, and you know, so he's monologuing like a villain does about this and that, and then you know, like Statham is defined. He's like, I'm gonna have my vengeance, or is it Ray Liotta that's like says you won't have your vengeance? And
well, because it goes to basically the Magi's daughter. She warps in because she gets her power, takes the rest of his power, and then she goes there and like shoots fire at the books and then freezes them. And Jason Statham's like, I'm gonna get my vengeance, and then he's like, no, you won't. But then the wife is like, but what about a mother's? And then she stabs Ray Liotta.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that's...
But then there's still more fighting.
Yeah, and then Jason Statham does the flip thing and then, like, slices him through the neck. And it does that, like, anime blood trail thing appearing. And, and then kind of it cuts to this thing where he finally says, I love you to her, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, he's like... they do this weird cut where it's like... Farmer and his wife like kind of hug it and kiss it, and the movie ends with him going, "There's something I've been wanting to tell you. I love you."
Yeah, and then once Ray Liotta dies, the army stops killing all the humans outside. But then it is on Jason Statham and his wife, and then literally the movie just ends.
Yeah,
Just
after he says that
straight-
he loves her, it cuts to the credits.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I was clicking around the 3 hour version, and I was like, I wonder if the ending in this one's any different. No, not different at all. It just literally ends
When you've
the
got
same
such
way.
a perfect, abrupt, jarring ending, what else do you need?
This
What else do you need, baby?
This is Citizen Kane level of just fucking perfection on how you end a movie. Okay,
Yeah,
just you're
yeah.
done. All your questions are answered. You don't need to know anything more. The movie's just over. You can leave.
In fact, next time I watch Citizen Kane, I'm gonna say at the end of it to whoever I'm watching it with, man, reminds me of Uwe Boll. I'll just start to that Blood Rain-esque, huh? Oh my god. So yeah, the movie ends there. What did you think when you like saw the movie? Do you remember what you thought when you saw it in theaters?
What was kind of funny is what I remember about the movie in theaters is that I was like, okay, it's an Uma Bowl movie, so it's gonna suck. But when I was sitting through watching it in theaters, it's actually like kind of grand, wide open shots. A lot of the cinematography isn't bad. Like it has
Right.
decent framing, decent thought behind a lot of the stuff they do. The fight scenes were well put together, with the exception of the very dumb lulls in between of bad dialogue and stuff.
Yeah.
But I ultimately, when I walked out of that movie in the theater, I actually wasn't that disappointed, and I was actually kind of surprised it wasn't a worse film. In a lot of respects, like
I was
it's-
surprised
it's-
this wasn't worse too. This is my first time watching it, and I was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
I
it's-
watched Blood Rain last year for the first time,
and that one's bad.
like 6 months ago. Yeah, and like Christina Loken or whatever, she's not the only one from that movie that's in this movie. Like the guy that plays Bastion is in it. There's a bunch of people that he carried over from Blood Rain. But yeah, like Blood Rain's like terrible, and like in Blood Rain, they'll introduce characters and you think that they're gonna be important because they have like a scene like where they talk for a little while, and then they never come up again.
Yeah.
It happens like 4 times.
Yeah, because you have that in Blood. And then before that, you had Alone in the Dark, which was also way worse in terms of how jarring and abrupt and just dumb that movie was overall. But this one was significantly more competent.
Yeah, I agree. Should we give it a blank
Oh,
out of
yeah.
10?
Yeah. What is your like? What? One thing I wanted to put out there really quick was a thought I'd had while watching this movie was if they had recast it with different actors, more period appropriate or fantasy appropriate, do you think it could have been a better film where actors could have elevated it more?
I don't know. The dialogue is pretty bad because I feel like you have good actors here. I feel like the direction that they were given isn't good. Like they were accepting. Obviously, Uwe Boll was accepting whatever performances like they were putting out, and just saying, "All right, that's good enough." And I also think there's some weird like choices in terms of like Ray Liotta like has a very like early 2000s haircut. He's got sideburns. Do you remember? Did you notice that?
Yeah.
He has sideburns and like this like weird short hair. Burt Reynolds has a Caesar haircut. Like very late 2000s thing.
Very basic haircut, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny like how just everybody kind of showed up and just wore the hair they brought. Except
Matthew
Jason Statham has
Lillard,
none.
he's got basically his Scooby-Doo hair. Well, no. His Wing Commander hair.
You're right,
It's just like short. So like the costumes were all good, I thought, but like nobody looks like the brother-in-law is the only one with like long hair. So that was very surprising. You would think like you'd have like a few other, Jason Statham, obviously, unless you want to put a bad wig on him, like I get him being bald or whatever.
Yeah,
but
like nobody looks like a medieval peasant. Yeah, so it has that going for it. But if I was to rate this movie, I think my joke would be Jason Statham perpetually running out of 10. would be my rating. But yeah, it's definitely like it's not it's not a great movie. It's not like an insanely awful movie. It's just like a very subpar mediocre film. So like maybe a 3 or a 4 out of 10 would be my overall rating for it.
yeah, and I'm gonna go a little higher than you. But I'm not going very high. I think last time when we met, I gave it a 6, and now that I've had some more time to think it over, I'll still give it like a 6, maybe a 5.5, because it's really not that bad. In fact, I wish it was worse because it would have been more fun in that way.
More fun to crap on it. Yeah.
One of my big complaints is like it's long. It's 2 hours and 5 minutes, and it feels like it's longer than that. So there's definitely some pacing issues. Things drag on, and some of the dialogue's crappy. But if it was like 90 minutes, and you just want like a dumb action movie that you don't really have to think about, it'd be perfect for that. But yeah, this isn't. There's worse ways you could spend your Saturday, I guess.
Yeah. I feel like you could probably, if you got a really good editor, you could probably cut this down into a much better film, like like a better 90-minute cut. That would be a way more entertaining film. But overall, like, it's oddly not Uma Thurman's worst work, which is kind of funny. But this is probably, I think this is probably the last movie he was able to do where he had a cast of this caliber ever again.
Right.
So this was the one that kind of marked the beginning of the end of anyone really wanting to seriously work with him. So this movie has that kind of trophy to it, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, if you're like a Jason Statham fan, you get to see him do a bunch of fights. So
Yeah, it's peak mid 2000s Jason Statham's and has that element to it, fresh off Transporter and some other films he was doing around that time. So yeah, had that for it. But I figure like this is probably a good point to probably end our conversation, to where we've now collectively talked about In the Name of the King for 3 hours, the same runtime as the 3-hour extended cut. But I want to thank you guys for dropping by and watching replay. Appreciate you hanging out. Thank you, Yahel, for joining me on this wonderful adventure through In the Name of the King, A Dungeon Siege Tale.
Indeed, thank you for inviting me.
as you have a horrible, like, just angry look on your face as you say that. But all right. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.